Welcome back. I'm still digging through the corpse of the mouse, and I'm trying to avoid the M word, Mickey, because I don't want an LAWYER coming after me. I said in the last movie, notice how he has gloves and then title card, and everyone was saying, you can't use the gloves, Mickey. Well, here he has gloves. There's a Reddit thread about this. Nobody seems to know what the hell this means. So this copyright is MCMXXIX, that's 1929. So maybe this falls in next year. I don't know. So the cartoon is 1928, but the title card copyright, it's whatever. I went into After Effects because I want to be a little more analytical about this. So I used the motion tracker. I didn't use the built-in stabilizer because sometimes that misfires and sometimes you need to like really control what happens in a scene. Actually, let me show you the side by side because it's kind of fun. So I got this copy from the highest thing I could find on YouTube was from Minimal GW 2020, just to give credit. And so here's the screen cap that I took. And it seems to be on 24 FPS, as far as I can tell. And see how it's like jiggering and it's shaking. And everyone's sort of used to this. They take it for granted this is what it's supposed to look like. It's not. And it only looks like that because the sprockets, the holes in the film have been stretched through years and years of use and abuse. But this is the best version I could get. So if you know of a better version than this, please let me know. I'd like to work with the best version I can get my hands on. Say at this point here, right? Watch this point. And it's just moving around. Any shot that you look at here, they all do this. I'll just go for some of them worse than others. Some of them are pretty bad. Like this one here is pretty bad. So I went into After Effects and used the motion tracker to stabilize. It's locked down now. So this is more likely what it would have looked like when it was seen first. And I'm not even sure, like, is the music usable or not, but let's take it off and just focus on the visuals. This one was harder to track because everything's moving to motion track and stabilize. You need a fixed point. In this case, the only one I can find was the center of the wheel. Because the background's panning, there's really not many points to do it. So I'd have to do a heck of a lot of work to get that. Now here we lock this down. And again, you remember here, this point, if I put the mouse cursor over it, that point should be pretty locked down. There was a wobble there. It's very hard to get all of them out, but for the vast majority of this, like this one locked down really beautifully. So, yeah, that way you can focus on the actual animation and technical stuff too, like the layers. So things begin to be noticeable, like different cells that may have shifted slightly, like there. See, watch Mickey's feet. See how he shifts. Now you might say, so what? Well, I want to make like a parody or a pastiche or an homage or a forgery that looks like it was done in that period. So I want to replicate some of these little issues. That means that when the camera operator put the painted cell on the pegs to shoot it under the rostrum camera, there was some stretch or play on those two. And I think at the time, 2 circular holes. And so somebody had stretched them, or they weren't punched at quite the right level. Something happened, and then as a result of that, this little wobble happened. You don't notice that if you're watching the unstabilized version because everything's moving. So this is much less forgiving. You can see some of the little production glitches on it here too. And most of this is stabilized. You can see the parrot is moving. And I think there's an overlay layer. I'm not sure if it's like, again, we also have the fact that these have been digitally compressed. So you're hoping that there hasn't been artifacts brought in by MPEG or MP4 compression or what have you, but I don't think so. There is a frame here that does shift, so that might be on me. But you do see that bucket moving. Now, I did notice something here when I played through this the first time. Again, talking about mistakes that suddenly start jumping out. The handle pops off on the bucket. But there's some nice overlapping action here, or opposing action here. The bucket's moving down and the handle's moving up. So it's kind of the important principle in animation that not everything moves in the same direction at the same time. So that's pretty good. But again, and that mistake would have happened, could have happened at the animation level, could have happened in the inking department, because every drawing was hand inked. They weren't Xerox, they didn't have that yet. So somebody had to have a pen and they were like on flat. But they were, hand copying out every detail of the animator's drawing. The animator could have made that mistake, or the inker could have made that mistake. And the other thing too I noticed as well, like in terms of frame rate in this period was before sound all over the place. People were hand cranking cameras, so but when you look at live action footage, sometimes it's 16, sometimes it's 18, so it can be difficult to figure it out. But because Steamboat Willie is from the sound era, it has to be 24 FPS because that's when that got locked in to synchronize sound with a particular frame rate. I had heard that on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs that they were doing it on wands, like 24 frames per second, and they were like falling apart. And that Roy had said to Walt that, why don't we just shoot a drawing hold it for 2 frames and should do 12 frames a second? Maybe it looks okay. And they did, and it looked great, and that saved the project. Now, based on what I'm seeing with Steamboat Willie, they were doing stuff on 2s here. So you can see here, this is on wands. I'm going frame by frame on 24 FPS. But then it'll go back to 2s. This is all on wands, and that drawing here was held for 2 frames. It's actually a longer hold, wands. This is all on wands. They really like doing wands for the big chewing stuff, which I don't think they needed to do, but they wanted to do it for this stuff. But I think there's a lot of stuff on wands there because the background's moving on wands. When you have a background moving, it tends to be on 24 frames a second. So let's find the scene where that isn't happening. Definitely on 2s. I'm hitting the forward key. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. This is all on 2s. So they very well knew about 2s and 12 frames a second. And they go to 1 frame a second or 24 FPS when they feel it's hit and miss. Like when they feel like they need to do it for something to look really smooth, then they would go to wands, which is expensive because a sheet of cell or acetate or whatever is not cheap. And they were really hurting. They were hurting for money to the point where Walt sold his car because there was some issue that they had, a technical problem when he sold his car to raise money. So yeah, look, here's another mistake. I love this. Watch the ear. Gone. What happened? I always wonder, like, who had a bad day that day? Yeah, so this one is there's the fun one to stabilize as well. I mean, I love the thing about 1920s rubber hose, early 30s animation. Everything's alive. Like blades of grass are alive. There's just a real joy about it. And in the different studios, the Fleischer studio as well. Like everything is moving. Everything is prone to be animated. They didn't have the kind of repression that I think a lot of animated work has now. There is angry Mickey. Look at that. You'd never see that now. The rage. I was tempted to do a video about is he a psychopath, given the mask of sanity, the psychopath checklist. How many of the boxes does he tick off? In this, he ticks off a few. Okay, let's see here. If I can find any more mistakes. Great fun. And here's my cat. He really resents a lot of the cruelty in this. So this is on wands. And because characters are pure black, it does create like a strobe. And with a really fast run like that, it's very hard to solve that. But what can you do? This is some of the crudest animations in the whole thing. Minnie, I'm assuming it's Minnie anyway. And actually, when she jumped on the pier, it was like, my God, that was some pretty lazy animation. Let's have a look again. Again, look at that. Like the hook, right? Like if we did this today, it would just be a hook. Oh, the hook picks her up. They bring it to life. They turn it into a little snake. Like, let's bring it to life. Everything is alive. And here you can see little wobbles on this guitar, probably because it's on like a cell there. See how it's shimmering, like it's moving around compared to the rope. The rope, as far as I could stabilize it, is locked down. So it seems, yeah, because because everything is black and white, it kind of can be hard to tell what's a cell and what isn't, because you don't have a painted texture background to compare anything to. But clearly the guitar is like a held cell. So the guitar lands on the ground, it's in a held cell, and then you put the goat on top of that and the magazine on top of that. So whatever's going on in the camera department, that layer is shifting slightly on the pegs. And that's how you're seeing that little shimmer or wiggle. And again, the hook is alive. Why wouldn't it be? I mean, everything is alive. Oh, a nice stagger there. Let's see how they did that. It's just a 1, 2, 1, 2. That's it. Effective though. So one way you do a stagger today is you do If I was doing that, I would start here and end here and then slow in to this. And then so I go, you have drawings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you expose them 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6. And that creates it like that. So that stagger is a little more irregular as far as I would have to spend some time and really pull the drawings apart and give them like identities and see how they exposed it. I could probably reconstruct the X sheet based on a simple scene like that. That might be a project. Staggers both ways. It's fine. Very crude pan there. Pans are a nightmare. Easy to do now, but this is a very simple one. But yeah, they're a bit of a headache. You can see too Mickey's feet like wiggling on the ground. They definitely had loose peg holes. That's my wife and I laughed when we saw this. That was a great scene. And actually, if you look at his tail here, this was a typical cheat that they did for secondary action. Like you do that now, you'd have all kinds of like subtlety to it. And what they did, I think, for some of one of the dog, what's his face, Goofy's dog Pluto, they would draw like a little curve like that, and then as he would go off the screen, the tail would just follow that curve. And I think that's what's happening here. So there's no, I think, seems like some more or less that's what's going on there. So it's sort of secondary action, but it's really a cheat. Okay, here we go. There's a great mistake here. And again, you can see because all the elements that are going to come to life, the washboard, it's on a painted separate cell layer. And so the thing to remember about cell layers is that they're not 100% transparent. They have that slight blocking of light. So when you put a cell layer down on top of a background, it subtly changes the color beneath it. It's hard to notice here because everything's black and white, but you will notice it. Oh, there's a big mistake. I'm going to actually play it again, see if you notice it. Watch again. Actually, a couple of mistakes. Watch again. And again. So they pop off. Oh dear. What happened? And then it's back on again. And now the big one. That's not even the big mistake. The big mistake is this. So the entire cell just shifts like an inch. So 1928, somebody lost concentration big time. So there's another detail, and it's not really a mistake as such, but it's subtlety that you'll see more so in color. You'll really notice it on color, and I think I'm gonna have to wait for some leveling changes here. This is a great scene. Like there's a lot of acting in this, and it's a long scene too. First time I watched this through, I didn't envy the person who did it. Like there's a lot of great stuff in this, and he's doing difficult things with the angles of his head, and he's moving around like 360, not 360, but full turnarounds. So notice there his head sort of changes tone from white to gray. Now I'm assuming here that it's not the compression causing artifact, because it might be, but I know there's some spots here where things are very suspiciously changing tone. And I think it's because cell levels are changing, like the head's been put on a separate layer, or some things are moving from one top layer to another layer, and that's causing the white to look slightly less white. Here's an interesting detail too about the way they're drawing him. This curve here, where the eye loops, the eyebrow line curves like that. You don't see that much later, so that's an interesting period detail to keep in mind. Like if we are looking at doing a forgery or an homage. The animal cruelty. Right, here we see, now look at Mickey's head. It goes gray, then lighter, then it's darker and lighter. Now the whole thing is going different colors too. Like there's like, if you look at this area here, it's going from one tone to another and back again. And here too, he's going light and then less light. So depending on what might be happening here, because there's so much of this going on, I don't think it's coming down to like warping on the film or anything like that. It might be like layers going from like a top. It might have his hand on one layer, his body on another, and there might be a point in the cycle where we want Mickey with no, he has a hand on a separate layer, his head and body on one layer, and there might be a point when you want to put the hand with the spinning on a lower layer, and so it's going from on top of him to below him. and you're seeing color shifts, and that might be what's happening here. Cuphead, the game which was done in this faux 1920 style, is beautifully done. They did that deliberately to try to do that homage. There's points when you can see the color popping, and I thought, well done, like that. You didn't have to do that. This is a very impressive scene too, like very like clearly trying to like do a 3D effect on the audience. I think this is the nicest animation. Let's look past the animal cruelty. In terms of I'm very hard for me to stabilize this too. How I stabilize this, if you see this little blurred blob, there's nothing to stabilize because you need a solid fixed point, but there's nothing here. So I had to do it frame by frame using that point as a reference to like try to lock this down, because the animation on the piglets, and it's all on wands too. Like if we go here, if we go back a bit actually on this beginning part here, I think most of it's on, a lot of it on wands anyway, some maybe on twos, but it's very smooth and very fast and very intricate too. There's a lot of business in there. And then he tortures the poor animal because I think he's a psychopath. And yeah, there's a bit of jittering on the frame. There's only so much stabilizing you can do with stuff like this. This one locked down really well. That's a nice little bounce too. Reuse. Great scene too. Like a lot of business there. And the little hip bounce, that's tremendous. Like, and because now I've locked it down, you can see, look at the jiggling on these awful shoes. They really made a whip for their own back with this design. And there was no, I think they must have realized, let's not do this nonsense anymore. There's no way with the hand ink that you can get that line locked down. It's going to wiggle, and it wiggles pretty bad. And again, the stabilized footage just brings out what they must have seen themselves when they did that first. Steamboat Willie is sort of supposed to be the bad guy, but like Mickey's a monster, so I don't know. I think we can reinterpret this. Do your job. And look at the bucket. You can see, again, it's wiggling against the background, which you won't notice on the unstabilized version, because again, everything's moving that minute fraction of half a pixel or whatever it is would be invisible. Oh. Oh yeah, there's one little curio here too. Like I'm not sure what the hell was going on. Look at this pole, and that thing is shifting around. Like not so much here. There we go. Like what on earth is that? That must have been a separate like overlay layer to have the like a transparent background beneath it. So I wonder, was it added on a separate layer and that began to shift around? But it's moving like crazy. And I thought when I saw it first, like, is this like a problem with the MPEG artifacts or something? And I don't think it is. I think it's something that they had at their end. So anyway, there were two other cartoons from this period that are also in the public domain. So I'll probably have to have a look at them too if I want to do as much research as possible on the visual style and what kind of material I can pilfer. And then the stuff that, because the nothing that I'm going to be releasing in the next 12 months anyway. So I think the Haunted House will come into public domain next year, and that's got a lot of gothic and dancing skeletons and stuff. So if I do want to do my personal project of H.P. Lovecraft, The Mouse of Madness, then I might be able to play with that a bit. And I'm only interested in doing like a few scenes, like treat them like scenes from a lost project, like we just discovered this secret project, and that's how I wanted to do it originally, and not tell anybody, and just release it into the wild and see what happens. But I might as well, like, I'm going to be making it, I might as well kind of get something back from the effort and then see if the lawyers want to shoot me down or not. But I don't see any brand confusion in it. Nobody's going to mistake H.P. Lovecraft for like a collaborator with Walt Disney or anything. And it'll be fun to do like a period piece that uses the techniques that I taught in my LinkedIn learning course, which, you know, I was very happy with. It came out really well. That course was all done using puppet systems like Flash or Harmony and stuff like that. So to do that hand-drawn, I think would be pretty cool, because then you would get away from that digital stuff as well. You're still using digital tools, but you're hand-drawing, so your fakery becomes a lot more believable. And the other thing too I would do would be to absolutely weather it and put jitters back in. The effort that I put into stabilizing this, I would reverse. Because if you're going to make a movie look old, but in After Effects you can just do a wiggle effect. So it's one line of a code, and then It just wiggles for as much as you like. That can also cover a multitude of sins. But the thing is, I would like to still have all the little stuff that won't be noticeable. So again, just it's believable. So the stretched peg holes that cause tiny things to move against the background. Those are little things that you unconsciously feel. You don't notice them consciously, but you do kind of sense that they're there. And there's also like shadows. If you look here too, there's just the faintest sense of a shadow because a layer of cell is not perfectly thin, so it does cast a shadow if the lights in the camera department aren't perfect. So lots of stuff like that you want to be able to fake pretty well. And there's probably like way more too, like if you go through frame by frame. I think on YouTube it's the bracket key or the arrow keys, the comma and period. I think they will take you through. Yeah, this is the later one. Yeah, it's the period key and the comma key. You can go back and forward using those. So this is, as you can tell, like very, very similar to Steamboat Willie. Release date 1929. Not in the public domain yet, but they're leaving them up. I don't think they're going after anybody. This is amazing. Like they've leveled up clearly from what they had done in Steamboat Willie. This is, yeah, look at that. It's tremendous. So, you'd have your work cut out for you doing that. Yeah, okay. So, scary. Again, from Steamboat Willie to that in 1 year. Very impressive. So, I'll upload the standalone full version of my stabilized version, and I'm going to do a short movie explaining how I did it, because it's so straightforward. It's tricky in spots, but it's not that hard. If you have I'm not an Adobe fan, but if you have After Effects, or even an old version of it, it'll have Motion Tracker. And then you'll be able to use that to stabilize old footage when you're looking at that rubber hose stuff. You got to stabilize it. Now, I stabilized all the stuff that I used from my course for the LinkedIn Learning Library on historical styles, because I was using a lot of footage from the 1920s, and it's all doing this. And as long as you can find one point on the background that's not meant to be moving, you can track that point and stabilize it. And then you can actually look at the footage for the first time and see what the animators were doing. So more of this stuff hopefully on the way. And you like and subscribe, all the rest of that algo garbage. Okay, see you in the next one. I don't have a sponsor, so if you want to support my work and help it to continue, you can subscribe to my Patreon. I'm making new animation projects week by week and providing animation assets that can be downloaded and used. I also have a very large collection of tutorials in the LinkedIn Learning Library covering animation and design, and I'm putting all the links to these in the notes below.